Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Therapy and Rhyme titled Opposite Game. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a music video on the screen here on YouTube. Apparently this is a project from Jan Helge Almas, hopefully I'm not mispronouncing that. They also feature their brother, Rune Almas, on the guitar in this track, so that'll be cool to hear. We're going to listen through it from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go, let's do it. What have we got? I like the panning of the strings.
Welcome to the opposite game. Here, false promises do reign. Masks of corruption enshroud the truth. Find chaos in the flame.
Oh, the menace to it.
Awaken your inner narcissist and embrace the darkness within. Beware, the tragedy for the common man is about to begin.
The bass is so prominent.
Opposite rules, twisting like a knife, trapped in the web of political strife. Secret documents concealed from our eyes, lies buried deep the fuel. Corruption's rise.
Very sense of groove to it with the bass and percussion though. Solid panning of the guitar on the right side there with the filtering. Was not expecting that spicy of a guitar solo, but well played. I like the double track vocals there. And the drums are frenetic as well.
It's game over for the common man. A tragic fate within deceit's dark plan. No happiness, only torment and pain. Words, they bleed, and it's art that stains.
I mean, that's horrific and dark. And I'm also seeing some parallels to modern day. And, reality, it's brutal. I feel like there are some interesting social comments being made here. I dig it. It's what music's all about. We're going to talk about this track more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion, my review of this track from an act named Therapy and Rhyme, titled Opposite Game. In this section, I'm going to be providing an overall song analysis from lyrics and vocals all the way through to production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? I get the feeling that this track is talking about the state of the world that they describe, where the people in power are basically burying any lies or any opposition there, and they're putting people in a position where being sane is seen as an insanity, like that is a shameful thing in order to not buy into the lie and the falsehoods that are put forward. It's this kind of dystopian apocalyptic landscape where nothing makes sense anymore, everything is opposites, and ultimately it is just a game to these people on top, whilst a lot of people, the majority of people below them, suffer. It's interesting to have an ending where it just ends on a bad note. Given what we discussed within this, I think that makes a lot of sense. Why would the control suddenly switch in the last bit unless there was some sort of crazy sort of like revelation or twist and turn? But then you spend so much time sort of, communicating most of the crux of it. Yeah, I feel like we handled the actual journey with the, like the first half and then the guitar solo, and then the second half is that final narrator at the start and the end. It was very, very clever. Yeah, it was ultimately quite effective. So I think if the story itself, I think people will find it kind of relatable, unfortunately. I think the vocal performances in general, with the male main vocals there, the narrator at the start there with the depth in their voice, making it seem very sort of cinematic. We had some female backing vocals as well at some point there. They harmonized quite nicely. And we had this kind of alt-rockish kind of tone and expression to ourselves where, we had the growls and kind of like the vocal thrash bits, the harsh elements that were nicely nestled alongside those cleaner sort of vocal melodies. We tried a variety of different ways of communicating on the microphone, and they typically worked. We showed solid vocal technique, were very comfortable in our hidden chest voice. Kept harmonies that harmonized well, or melodies and harmonies that harmonized all the other elements and showed a chemistry within the atmosphere that it described. I like the part around the 130 mark where there's heavy reverb tails there, and it's very kind of spooky and mystical, I like that we adjusted the expression intensity of the vocals as well to suit different moods and not make it too constant, because we didn't want to take listeners' attention for granted or overwhelm them. The track itself structurally, given that the vocal technique, whether it was the harsher kind of growled vocals, sort of great technique, very sustainable approach to that. They don't sound like they're gonna lose their ability to do that anytime soon there. Very comfortable on a hidden chest voice there. Just the structure of the track though itself at 4 minutes 51 is very, very well fleshed out. You have that kind of orchestral intro there with the kind of dun 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 quiet rhythms, the triplet flow of some of the strings, the others kind of mourning over top there with mid to high range kind of melodies and buzz, to then have the narrator again come over that part there as things start to build and really illustrate a sense of tension in there. We had some very low strings as well, kind of emanating in that sort of bass range there on the 35-second mark, and they came in with it's a real sense of danger. And I think it was also the note choices in there, not just working with the minor scale, potentially even the Phrygian, but just it sounded incredibly depressing and oppressive there just from that part, just with a combination of strings and narrator. And then when the guitars, bass, drums, etc. come in, it's just that extra little bit of oomph there. I have to say it's about to begin. The tragedy for the comment is about to get in, we're just straight into it, you get the rest of it, and you're being spoiled. And I said earlier that the bass was very prominent in the mix, and I suppose this is more of a studio production thing. I mean that it's quite loud in the mix. Not that it's dominant over other things compositionally. It's written in a way where it's very supportive of the root notes underneath those chord progressions, and I think its actual placement is very, very good. I just think maybe, I don't know, and this isn't even really a criticism, I'm not sure. It could have been a deliberate design decision to have it this loud, but I also wonder whether we were mixing in speakers or monitors that didn't necessarily accurately replicate the bass response. If this was a deliberate decision, then feel free to sort of skip this part, but if we didn't do the car test, it can be good in situations like this, especially if we're not sure about the bass response or if we haven't tested it. Just to go find a car stereo and just test it on a car stereo to see how loud it is in that. Because it usually exaggerates the amount of bass, and at least then you know if it still sounds good in a star stereo with exaggerated bass, you're probably gonna have a good time with it everywhere else. In fact, as I listen through this, I think it's more that maybe the drums are a little bit subtle in the mix, but I like the variety of different cymbal, sort of kick and snare grooves there. I like the triplet timing there across the sort of main 4/4. It kind of sounded like we're slow dancing to our demise. We had a variety of different sort of shake-ups. We weren't just playing solid beats there in a sort of triplet flow. We were switching things up and adding snare fills. We had like moments later on, maybe even earlier than that, but definitely later on, we were adding those double kicks in for extra bit of speed and heaviness to the percussion. And we were very comfortable around that 1:45 mark as well, with the change of pace moving into a swing feel there, moving away from the solid triplets there, dun 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 dun. Again, segmenting and sort of like structuring with different chapters within this piece there. Very interesting, not taking the listener's attention for granted, but just the bounciness there kind of gives you something to sort of nod along to there. It's less kind of static maybe than the previous parts, going into a great sense of groove with the 2-minute mark there, going in sort of like a kind of a breakdown or halftime-ish kind of feel there. I just liked how those toms on the kit were in time with those bass parts there. There was a great sort of sense of awareness there. And I think around the 2-minute 20 mark, where they have the guitars on the right side playing some distorted riffs asymmetrically within the stereo field, you just granted this insight into their sort of sound design decisions. I like that we aren't afraid of having one part on one side there and allowing things to be a bit uneven. Then it creates interest for the listener and ironically makes us focus more, which then it gets us to go, oh, why are they doing the da 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 da? What is that riff then? And you start to appreciate the riff, and by the time you've really sort of processed all of that, you typically come in with everything else again. I think that's actually before that guitar solo that we had around the 2-minute 30 mark. And while I did like a lot of the chord progressions and various parts of the guitars played, the kind of rocky blue kind of phrasing, that lead solo was tremendous. I really like the way we voiced it. I like the cadences to certain elements there. I thought the actual technique, especially in the blindingly fast bit with the unison bends and the hammer-ons and pull-off parts around that middle mark there, was ridiculous. And I like the fact that we played with rhythm and kind of teased the listener a little bit with how aggressive we were getting with it. I like that the notes came through clearly, and the use of the wah pedal as well made it very kind of neat. It added an extra bit of percussiveness and an interesting sort of tone and texture to it. And for us to then go into this kind of really kind of like palm muted alternate picking part, almost Steve Vai kind of part there, to go back into a more sort of like palatable, digestible melody that would kind of work within the surrounding chord elements and the groove of the, you know, the drums and bass and everything else, just shows an awareness that we need to not only be showing how well we can play and add to it, but that we can also support. I'm also wondering whether the dominance of the bass is partly because of the way that the guitars are filtered, whether they were filtered at like 150 hertz or something like that, and they were just allowed not as much sort of room in the low end there. I mean, again, these aren't criticisms, these are simply just things I'm sort of thinking about as I go through the review here. I kind of understand wanting to offer the bass a lot of presence, and I think the bass has a great tone to it. And I think a lot of the guitar riffs are more melody based anyways there. A lot of the kind of body and ground of the track is the bass. I think we even have some sort of tappy parts going in the outro with the bass there, which is kind of neat there. I like that we're not just treating the bass as a rhythm instrument or a lower end filler there. We're allowing ourselves to be a bit more sort of playful with the way we present it. But it's also knowing, for example, not to have all the instruments all the time. So like, I like that the guitar kind of simplifies its like approach to like octaves or power chords or times at the start, and then it takes that time to sort of, when there's space, to really sort of pull forward once we've had enough context of the lyrics to kind of get feel for it. But I think that if you try to get a lot of those kind of string section elements in with the guitars and bass and everything in that midsection, when you might have, to be fair, I might have been misconstruing it, but it might have just been a little bit too busy and almost a little bit too sort of staircase-ish. Like, you know, constantly building and building and building, never know when you're going to reach the top. But honestly, I'd listen to the song in my own time. I think the composition itself is compelling. There's a lot of variety within the arrangement and the way things are structured and transferred. I don't think there's a note out of place with the performance either. I mean, thematically, I just feel like a lot of the color and interest comes from those vocal parts, as well as a really neat guitar solo there with a really fluid sort of expression. I think the minor leaning to it is tight, and the bluesy use of the blues scale, especially with the suffering and depression people are going through, makes sense. But I also feel like the force and power and aggression of the tone and texture and timbre of the instruments makes a lot of sense as well. The danger and the suggestion of the string sections at the start and at the end is good. For the bass to kind of ride us out the end with the tapped in elements, I think it's just kind of fitting considering how dominant it was through the piece. It's almost like the bass has rolled over everything. But ultimately, yeah, I think, you know, great use of key signature, the chord progressions and the various sort of ideas communicated what they were needed to. Ultimately, just it's a really well written song. Studio recording, mixing and mastering is tight. Really happy with the way that is approached. Again, I know I mentioned the loudness of the bass, but I'll just leave that as undecided at this point in time. I'd probably have to listen to it on mono to get a really good kind of feel for it. And there were parts where I was listening back to it whilst I was sort of giving feedback, you know, revisiting stuff, and I was like, oh no, the bass is actually totally fine here, you know, etc. You know, it's why you got to be careful about final decisions until you're really sure about it. But generally, the string sections, the bass, the drums, guitars, you know, vocals, all the different takes there, they came through nice and clearly within it. There was great use of compression, EQing, music surrounded you in the headphones. There's interesting filtering, like with the vocals, the reverb tails and delays, and then the guitar with the filtering on the sides there to make it sound a bit more kind of airy. I like the dynamic range was sort of compositional as well as in production. I think it was great to have the instruments kind of stop at some point, like the drums would just kind of take a break, and we typically, again, were measured when we re-entered elements there. There weren't huge changes in loudness. There was glowing, it was nice and loud with a bit of pumping, bus compression, limiting was handled. Yeah, honestly, again, aside from the bass levels, no applicable constructive critique in them, and then again, as I've said, that's subjective. Ultimately, I wasn't sure what to expect going into this just from a listener's perspective, because I haven't listened to Therapy and Rhyme before, but I'm actually really impressed with it. I feel like this is some really good music from people who genuinely care about the art form. And I wish them all the best of luck in future. I feel like this is subject matter that is meaningful at this point in time that a lot of people will be able to relate to, so it'll just be interesting to see what else they do with it. But thank you for watching my review of this track from my next name Therapy and Rhyme, titled Opposite Game. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and a YouTube page. Stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time. As need the hell more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.